In the modern social media world of Formula 1, things do get messed around a bit by the people who post stuff. I know that doesn't make any sense, but do bear with me here because this is actually going somewhere. I think. I haven't thought that far ahead yet. Some drivers become the perpetual victim. Some drivers the perpetual villain. Some are the constant underdog, because fans of that particular driver will say that the team is blatantly favouring the other guy, or the FIA and stewards are biased against another particular driver. Because how dare the stewards penalise a driver for, let me just check my notes here, speeding up behind the virtual safety car to drive alongside the car in front in an attempt to jump him at the restart before the race has even gone green again. Formula 1 Twitter is going to Formula 1 Twitter, isn't it? But on the other side, drivers have become a meme, or they become the pantomime villain. And some drivers over the years have been able to lean into it. Like Jason Plato, the BTCC driver, he's soaked up his panto villain persona incredibly well, and it just so happens that he's an incredibly nice bloke away from the track. It was all a character, it was all a persona, it was all, well, entertainment. And for the meme side of things, George Russell has embraced the T-pose thing, and there's some other drivers that have embraced bits and pieces as well. Bottas is just another one to bring up. They're not these kinds of memes that got run into the ground, like, ha must be the water, ha Kimi and his steering wheel, ha ice cream, ha. Yeah, it got boring really quickly, didn't it? Wow, I really sounded like a goat or a sheep while doing that bit. Could be worse, I could be laughing like Jimmy Carr. But sometimes the drivers become the meme themselves. Taki Inui became one because he got run over by the medical car at the 1995 Hungarian Grand Prix, and it's the thing that he's most famous for. Now you might be thinking, have you done that video yet? You should probably do that video. But the answer to that is no, I haven't done that video. I'm not doing that video unless I can get hold of that picture of him being run over. And at 350 quid, it's a solid no. Yuji Ide also became a meme, as did Ricardo Rosset. Insert another driver here if you want. But when it comes to the man, the myth, the legend, or the man, the meme, the legend, you can't go much further than Pastor Maldonado. Coming up through the ranks like other drivers, Maldonado found himself in GP2, which is now Formula 2, in 2007. In 2009, his teammate was Nico Hülkenberg. Their team, ART, would win the title that year, and Hülkenberg would become champion, with Maldonado finishing 6th with a couple of wins and some podiums. But in a way, it was lucky he was racing at all, because in 2005 he was racing in the Formula Renault 3.5 series, a series since lost to history, and it was, well, it was actually a brilliant series, mostly because the cars looked like Formula 1 cars, even if they weren't. If you don't know what a Formula Renault 3.5 is, it's one of the 3 cars that Richard Hammond drove when he was driving the Formula 1 car on Top Gear. It was the middle car of the 3. It's also one of my favourite cars on iRacing, but anyway, at this race in Monaco, Matteo Meneghello, I think that's how it's pronounced, lost control at Massenet and spun. The car stalled and he got out and hopped over the barrier while the marshals got to work. About 90 seconds later, Maldonado came barrelling in a bit too fast for yellow flag conditions and clipped the front end of this parked car, knocking over a marshal who was badly injured. Maldonado would have likely been banned for life from racing in Monaco, but after accepting full responsibility for the incident and him and his dad paying for the marshal's medical bills and rehab, it made the Monaco racing authorities reconsider their stance. He was still banned for 9 races that year. In 2006 he might have won the title, but was disqualified for a technical infringement at Misano. Draco Racing tried to appeal the decision, but it was upheld. But despite not winning the championship, he attracted some attention from GP2 teams, and he went to GP2 between 2007 and 2010. And he won the championship in 2010, the year after Hülkenberg did. This was a grid that also had Sergio Perez, Jules Bianchi, Romain Grosjean, Oliver Turvey, Marcus Ericsson and Brendan Hartley on it. So it's not like there was no competition. Maldonado managed to secure the title with a round to spare, and as a result, he was picked up by a Formula 1 team. Williams. Although it has to be said his original destination wasn't Williams, there were a couple of other teams that he was supposed to go to. He was supposed to go to Campos Meta in 2010, the team that later became Hispania, and he was likely to be Bruno Senna's teammate. But the other driver could have also been Pedro de la Rosa because Spanish, or Vitaly Petrov. But the situation became way too complicated with regards to Campos' situation, with management changes, funding issues and everything else, so that destination was abandoned. The other destination was Stefan GP, but they'd been barred from entering the championship. So after spending another year in GP2, which he won, he then came into Formula 1 for 2011, replacing Hülkenberg. Williams had taken a punt on Maldonado because they thought he could be a fast driver, but also having some backing from a state-owned oil company sweetened the deal. His first race ended with transmission problems. He also retired from the Malaysian Grand Prix after being knocked out in the first qualifying session, but managed to take his first finish in China, albeit in 18th place. In Spain, he got into the top 10 in qualifying for the first time and did the same thing at Monaco, qualifying 8th versus his 9th at Barcelona. But he missed out on a good points haul for 5th place when he was punted off by Hamilton at Saint-Devote. Yeah, 2011 was the year that you definitely stayed out of Lewis Hamilton's way. Maybe I should do that video in the future. 2011, the year of hell. But it went a bit downhill after that for Pastor. He spun off in that Canadian Grand Prix of 2011, but then qualified well at Silverstone, the Nürburgring and Hungary, but ended up having poor race pace. He was 14th at Silverstone, 14th in Germany and 16th in Hungary, where he also got a penalty for speeding in the pit lane. At Spa, he finally scored a point, but it would be his only point of the season. And also at Spa, he had another moment with Hamilton, but this time in qualifying. Hamilton had squeezed past him while overtaking while both drivers were on a hot lap, and in his frustration, Maldonado swiped the McLaren on the run down the hill to Eau Rouge. For that, he got a 5-place penalty, while Hamilton got a reprimand. But like mentioned, he finished 10th in that race, which could have been more points if not for the incident with Lewis. But it was his only point of the season, and he didn't reach the top 10 shootout again for the rest of 2011. At Abu Dhabi, he received a drive-through and then a 30-second post-race penalty for ignoring blue flags. So, rookie season over, it's time to go into 2012. For this year at Williams, it was an all-South American affair, as Maldonado's teammate would be Bruno Senna, Ayrton's nephew. And it looked like Maldonado had shaken off the cobwebs and adapted to Formula 1 life, as he was running strongly in both of the opening races in Australia and Malaysia. But Pastor dropped it on the curb exiting turn 6 while chasing Alonso, and then his engine went pop in Sepang. So if Pastor had settled for position in Australia, maybe he would have got some big points. But it is what it is. He did get his first points of the year in China, finishing 8th, and then a puncture ended his race in Bahrain. But it's the Spanish Grand Prix where he showed the world that he did have a certain something. But the thing is, I've done that video in full already, so I'll just keep this bit brief. So Maldonado had initially qualified 2nd behind Hamilton, but Hamilton didn't have enough fuel in his car, so was excluded and sent to the back. Pastor was promoted into 1st place with Alonso in behind. And despite being beaten into turn 1, Maldonado used the pit stops to get back into the lead and held Alonso off, and kept it on the road. So he took his only win in Formula 1 and the only win for a Venezuelan driver. And the only podium of his career. Conspiracy theories started going around the internet after that particular race that Bernie and Pirelli had rigged the Grand Prix. There were accusations that there was this Pirelli lottery where one team every race would get a good set of tyres, and it just so happened to be Frank Williams' 70th birthday that weekend, so Williams conveniently won that lottery. It was all bollocks. But after reaching those lofty highs at the Spanish Grand Prix, it was back to being inconsistent at Monaco. He got a 10-place grid penalty for crashing into Perez, and he also copped another penalty for a gearbox change. At the start, he hit De La Rosa, and that was race over before the first corner. At Canada, he would have bumped Jenson Button out of the top 10, but stacked it into the Wall of Champions. Another gearbox penalty sent him to the back there as well. He managed to run as high as 10th in Canada, but he was 13th come the end. Valencia was another odd moment. He'd qualified 3rd and worked his way back up the field later on in the race, overtaking people in much superior cars such as Mark Webber, so he was running 4th with a couple of laps left to run. I think it was because of the tyres being how they were in 2012, because they were just all over the place. Maldonado tried to overtake Hamilton for 3rd, but Lewis squeezed past it off, only for Maldonado to jump back onto the track over a high curb and hitting Hamilton, taking Lewis out. Pastor would then finish 10th, but a penalty for the incident dropped him to 12th. At Silverstone, he collided with Perez, taking Perez out of the race, and Perez was highly critical of Maldonado's driving. For all these incidents, Pastor got a €10,000 fine. Germany though, the poor performance wasn't his fault. He qualified 6th in the wet, but during the race some debris damaged the car and he finished 15th. So by the summer break, he had 29 points. The thing is, 25 of those 29 had been from his Spanish Grand Prix win. And Spa was another penalty-laden event. He jumped the start, which actually might have saved him from Grosjean causing that multi-car pile-up at turn 1, and then got another penalty for causing a collision with Glock, so he would serve those at Monza. But at Monza, he showed his pace, finishing 11th and only half a second behind his teammate, who took the final point. Singapore was another good qualifying show, second on the grid, but lost a potential podium with hydraulic failure. And he'd do the same thing at Suzuka, 14th on the grid, starting 12th due to penalties, and finishing 8th. That 8th place in Suzuka was his first points since he won the Spanish Grand Prix. Korea and India were 2 races to forget. Okay, he did finish 9th in India, but he got tagged by Kobayashi and got a puncture which set him back a bit. At Abu Dhabi, he returned to the front of the grid, starting 3rd after Vettel was excluded and was hanging with the top cars until his KERS unit failed and lost a lot of time. But he still managed to finish in 5th, which was his best finish since Spain. He scored his final points of the season with 9th at Austin and overall finished 15th in the standings. It's actually the lowest a driver has finished in the season while taking a win. There's your pub trivia fact for today. A whopping 14 penalties were handed to him, which was 5 more than the next 2, which were Perez and Schumacher, equal on 9. In total, he lost 38 grid positions. 2013 brought a new teammate in Valtteri Bottas, a rookie who had shown some decent promise in the juniors, and it seemed that Pasta was to be back in the thick of it with regards to collisions and other things. Although, not all of those collisions were his fault, because at Monaco that year, Max Chilton moved over on him on the run between the chicane and to back and took Maldonado out. This collision is listed as one of his greatest hits, when he had nothing to do with it at all. But that's not to say that he wasn't making mistakes. At Australia, he spun off all by himself, and he went off the road at Malaysia and damaged the car there as well. He hit Sutil at Canada and got a penalty for that, and did the exact same thing at Belgium, as well as hitting Di Resta in that same race. Although it does have to be said that not all of these collisions resulted in a retirement for one or both cars. It seems that these lists of Pastor Maldonado's greatest hits contain anything that could be considered contact, whether it was his fault or not. In 2013, he scored 1 single point, while Bottas scored 4, and in that season he had 3 retirements. All crashes and only 1 not his doing. Although admittedly the Williams car that year wasn't great because Bottas didn't fare much better. So for the 2014 season, Maldonado moved to Lotus, who were in a real pickle financially, and it's that 2014 season where he had what has become his most famous moment. He pitched Esteban Gutierrez into a spectacular role at Bahrain, for which he received another penalty. He also hit Ericsson in Spain and got a penalty for that as well. A collision with Bianchi in Hungary resulted in a spin, and he also crashed in Belgium and Singapore, but did that in practice. Now it's quite easy to sit there and go, haha meme, haha crashed a lot, www.hasmaldonadocrashedtoday.com and things like that. But through some digging to do this video, I found something that might end up telling a different story. But at the same time, it might not. I've put this bit in because I think it's interesting. I found this blog called F1 Metrics, and they did this article at the start of 2014, so okay, admittedly, it doesn't contain the entire 2014 season. But then again, Maldonado didn't retire at all as a result of a crash that year. Okay, yes, he hit people like Gutierrez, Ericsson, Bianchi and, well, Gutierrez again, but it's the following that are taken into account for these statistics. A DNF due to a crash or collision, a disqualification, running out of fuel, voluntarily withdrawing, and non-classifications. Maldonado is actually above the likes of Montoya, Coulthard, Watson, Fisichella, and Mario Andretti in terms of retirements through driver error. The way to read this chart is, the lower down the table they are, the more crash prone they are. Damon Hill is below him, Johnny Herbert, Adrian Sutil, James Hunt, and at the bottom of the table is Ukyo Katayama, who in 95 starts retired through driver error every 3.2 races or so. Maldonado is at about, 8.4, 8.5. So you might be saying, yeah, but more races a season, more races total, so on and so on and so on. But Katayama has 95 starts. Maldonado? Also 95. What's also interesting is that Häkkinen had a driver-related retirement once every 9.5 starts, while Schumacher had one every 9.6. I'll leave a link to the whole thing so that you can read it for yourself once you're done with this video. I say all the time in these videos that stats don't tell the story, but it's interesting either way, and you might want to look at it. If you take into account the drivers who took part in the 2014 season, Maldonado was at the bottom of the then current drivers, but still ahead of Kobayashi, Gutierrez, Grosjean and Sutil. Although it does have to be said that there are some bits and pieces that would be useful, like one of the comments on the blog said. Maybe have single driver incidents and accidents caused by interaction with another driver, because Maldonado did hit a few people with both drivers continuing. I guess it's because Pasta's crashes and hits were a little bit more flamboyant than others. Gutierrez at Bahrain, the key example, or when he tried to take the R-Factor 2 eSport line at Spa, things like that. And he seemed to be doing it a little bit more often than other drivers on the grid, so it moves him a little bit further up in the meme stakes. And because of his meme status, a website was set up called Has Maldonado Crashed Today that would update to a simple yes if Pasta did something that could be considered a crash. It was shut down in 2016 when he didn't find a drive for that year. But underneath the meme, underneath the crashing, underneath the silly mistakes, there was some genuine talent. He was quick when the stars aligned, but as anybody will tell you in other sports, world class on your day doesn't make you world class. With fewer incidents, he would have made it as a decent mid-grid driver, getting into the points quite often, and there were some big points lost in 2011 and 2012 through being too reactionary with certain things. Although, admittedly, the collision with Hamilton at Monaco in 2011 wasn't his fault. Same with Chilton in 2013. And that's another thing I don't think is fair. When listing his collisions, ones like those are included when they had nothing to do with him. Webber at Abu Dhabi in 2012, not Maldonado's fault. The BBC wrote an article in 2015 called Is Pastor Maldonado a Bad Driver? And there were some cases for and cases against. The red mist that descended in the moment that made him look like an amateur was top of the list, but at the same time, there were plenty of cases for him being able to show that there was something underneath all of that. In 2011 he was quite evenly matched with Barrichello in qualifying, but there were some other moments through his career, such as in 2015 where he went wheel to wheel with Jenson Button in China and put on a fantastic show, and then it was Button who messed up and took them both off the road. Pasta wasn't at fault, but the internet made it seem like he was. But there was the tendency to make things a little bit worse for himself, and not always through crashing. At that same Grand Prix in China in 2015, he'd been fighting one of the Toro Rossos, and when he pitted, he overshot the pit lane entry, and then spun while driving too hard to undo the lost time. He did something similar in another Grand Prix where he had brake issues and overdid it instead of trying to nurse the car home, and that too caused him to go off the road. Andrew Benson at the BBC called Maldonado an enigma, a driver who on occasion could show that he was genuinely one of the fastest drivers on the grid. It's just that those times where he showed his speed, they were just, well, very rare. But Maldonado didn't care what people thought. He just wanted to turn up and do the best he could. He said that to find the limit, you have to cross the limit, and only he had the balls to keep on crossing said limit. He also said that when he crashed, it was big news, but when others crashed, it was nothing. But after leaving Formula 1 in 2016, he did the Daytona 24 in 2019 with Dragon Speed Racing. And won. He also raced for Dragon Speed in the 2018-19 World Endurance Championship, back when the WEC went across 2 years rather than being in 1 year like it is now, and won at Spa, with the team coming third in class at the end of that season. LMP2 that is. So there was something there. Just maybe not in Formula 1. It looks like Maldonado is completely done with racing now, given that he's 40 years old and he's probably got other stuff that he wants to get on with in life, like raising his family and bits and pieces like that. I mean, sure, he was messy on track and he crashed a bit far too often, but one thing we can't deny, that bloke sure was entertaining. So then, a look at the life and times of Pastor Maldonado, a guy who crashed a lot, but actually, statistically, was safer than some of his contemporaries. If this has been a fun look through the motorsport history books, then do leave this video a like so I know a good job was done. And for more from the channel, get subscribed and also get that bell on so you never miss out on anything else that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the mad lads at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help keep the lights on around here or help with image purchasing, there's a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and anything else you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks for a one and done donation and memberships so you can Patreon without the Patreon. So until next time, I've been Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.